The Fearless Girl arrived here on Wall Street rather unexpectedly last year to mark International Women's Day. With her hands on her hips, defiantly staring down the charging ball, she quickly became a powerful symbol of the need for increased diversity at the top levels of corporate America. She'll soon be moving just a couple of blocks away to a more permanent spot facing the New York Stock Exchange. The Fearless Girl's arrival here coincided with what was an extraordinary year when it came to the rise of activism focused upon the empowerment of women. None more so than the emergence of the Me Too movement, which enabled unprecedented numbers of survivors to come forward with their stories of sexual assault. Tarana Burke founded the movement a decade ago while working with young women of colour from impoverished communities. Her activism led her to be named to Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2018. I recently had the chance to sit down with Tarana, and I began by asking her whether she believes we've seen meaningful change ever since the movement gained international attention 6 months ago.
I think we are leaning towards meaningful and significant change. I think there's been a change of hearts and minds, that's meaningful and significant. I think people have embraced the idea or really understand the magnitude of sexual violence nationally and globally in a way that they haven't before. And that's a real shift from what we knew before Me Too went viral.
You said recently that it's now imperative that we reshape the narrative of Me Too. In what way has it become distorted?
Well, I think that there's a popular notion that there's all these misconceptions that Me Too is about taking down powerful men, that it's about targeting men, and like there's some sort of witch hunt. And all of those things are wrong. All of those things are not at all what the movement is about, and it's taken away. It's really watered down and taken away from the most important part of the conversation, which is the people who actually said Me Too.
Me Too, for you, was founded on the premise of empowerment through empathy.
Yeah.
Why is it so important for those young women of colour, particularly from impoverished communities, to feel comfortable hearing those words?
So, Me Too came out of, we were already doing work. One of my close friends and I, this woman named Shantae Smith, and I were living in Selma and working with children, working with young people. And increasingly there were young people, young women coming forward and sharing their experience with sexual violence. The ways in which we connected to them most is when we showed them empathy. And showing them empathy was saying, I have a story too. It's empowering. So the thing about sexual violence is that as pervasive as it is, as widespread as it is an isolating feeling. So just the sheer knowledge and understanding that you are not the only person it happened to, that you are not alone in your circumstances, it creates a sense of power and community.
You've said in terms of sexual violence that it doesn't see race or class, but the response to it does. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's obvious that sexual violence, it doesn't know race or class or gender or age or, any kind of status, right? It happens to everybody without discrimination. But the way we respond to it, the way people respond to it definitely is different by determining your race or your class or your gender expression. And so what that means is when you look at the situation of, say, R. Kelly, and Black women have been standing up for almost 20 years saying, this man is a perpetrator, this man is preying on Black and brown girls, he should not be in our community. And we haven't seen any backlash. We haven't seen a groundswell of support around that. And so that can't be. We have to, the reason why in my work I talk about centering those that are most marginalized is because history has shown us if we don't, they get left out.
So now when we talk about doing something in response to this epidemic, we've seen a wealth of legislation introduced in the past few months, both the state level, a federal level, at a local level. It's tended to focus on sexual misconduct in the workplace. And often the title of the bills reference Me Too. What have you thought of the legislation that's been introduced?
I think it's a start. I think it's great that there's a focus on sexual harassment in the workplace and that there are policy changes and legislative changes. I think we have to do a lot more. There's a spectrum of sexual violence. And I think what happens and what has happened in the Me Too movement is that people feel very comfortable talking about sexual harassment in the workplace.
Sure.
And so it's a really pervasive problem. That's not to diminish the problem, but there's a whole spectrum of sexual violence that happens. And so when we focus there, that means that we're not focusing on child sexual abuse. We're not focusing on rape on college campuses and adult survivors and things like that. We're not focusing on queer folks and people with disabilities. There's just a whole spectrum of issues that we need to deal with. And we've only begun to slightly unpack that in the last 6 months.
Well, you said we have a start, but we really need to do much more. Often when you've referenced these predators, you've blamed the systems that are in place that enable them to act the way they do, whether that be patriarchy, whether it be capitalism. Those are huge systems, deeply entrenched. So can legislation tackle that, or is it more than that?
There are lots of ways that we can attack patriarchy, that we can dismantle patriarchy and capitalism, and that doesn't just come from legislation. That comes from the power of people. We talk about, you hear the term like speaking truth to power all the time, but it really is important for us to talk about what's true, right? You chip away at the system when you undo what the system is trying to do. And when we start undoing those things, when we have, we talk about having equal pay, and we talk about, flipping things on its head and having more women represented, when we talk about having more women in Congress and things like that, those are ways to dismantle patriarchy because it calls for us to do something different.
You used a really powerful phrase there, the power of the people. A lot of people 6 months ago who expressed their support for this movement, perhaps watching and thinking, what can they do now to stay involved? What would be your advice to them?
So there are tons of ways for folks to get involved, even if it's just volunteering at your local rape crisis center. I say often that the Me Too movement is about filling in the gaps. And there are so many gaps in resources in our communities. And so I often urge people to look for those gaps. But the way that we start making change is not necessarily like, I need to sign up for a thing. You need to pay attention. We don't talk about sexual violence, and it is everywhere. And so if people want to get involved, let's start telling the truth. Let's start having open conversations, whether they're in your family or in your church or in your home. We need to really start unpacking and dealing with sexual violence head on.
Tarana Burke is, of course, the founder of the Me Too movement. She's also the senior director at the Brooklyn-based Girls for Gender Equity organization. Tarana, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.